Anything that you're unwilling to talk about is what's going to ultimately be your demise. What we resist persists, and as we resist it, we don't want to look at it, and so then it becomes the thing that actually takes us out. Us not talking about the reality of where we actually are as a company in revenue, in the market. A lot of founders avoid that conversation because they don't want people to worry, or they don't, they want to make people feel safe or secure in their position, or they just don't know how to talk about it.
Hey everybody, this is Chad Brown. So Chad is a founder coach. Can you explain that a little bit? What is a founder coach?
So, well, you know very well what I do.
I know very well, yes.
But I get to work with founders to scale their vision to their team. That's the best way that I think of it. Most founders, anybody who's listening to this that has founded a company, who's an entrepreneur, knows that one of the most challenging things is to take what you have in you, that vision, that drive, that care, and to scale it to your team. And it's incredibly difficult. In fact, that's where a lot of businesses fail, is because the founder's driving and the people aren't on the same page with them. They don't have the same care for the product, the client, the difference, the vision, the mission. And so that's what I help founders do.
Absolutely. So I've experienced that myself. So the reason why Chad is on the podcast today, he is a dear friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
We go way back. So he'd been my coach for, probably over a year.
Over a year, yeah.
Yeah, over a year of really intense coaching, doing exactly what you were just saying. Luminous was at like a pre-seed stage, like very early, very raw. We had just gotten money in, and we were dealing with a lot of things. So Chad helped me work through a lot of those things that he's talking about. So I got a couple questions here. This is the exact perspective that I wanted to bring onto the podcast. So my audience is more e-commerce founders. That's who I'm going for. But the whole point of Ops Unfiltered is to have unfiltered conversations about the messy beginnings of companies. And I know that a lot of e-commerce founders could probably get a lot of value out of this conversation. So I have a couple not rapid fire questions, just a couple questions to get us started going in the conversation. What is the biggest silent killer of an organization?
The biggest silent killer of an organization? That's an interesting question. When you say silent, does that mean something that people don't notice happening?
Yeah, so that was an intentional word. Yes, like the reason why I said silent is because I think that's probably the most important type of killer.
Yeah.
Because if something was just like so blatant and out there, like it'd be obvious, and you'd just be like, "Yeah, stop that."
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is that kill, especially e-commerce companies or even SaaS companies. It's the silent things.
Yeah.
It's things that you choose not to.
It's anything you're not talking about. To me, anything that you're unwilling to talk about is what's going to ultimately be your demise. What we resist persists, and as we resist it, we don't want to look at it, and so then it becomes the thing that actually takes us out. Right? So that can look like conflict between partners or conflict between founder and executive team. That can look like us not talking about the reality of where we actually are as a company in revenue, in the market, all of that sort of stuff. A lot of founders avoid that conversation because they don't want people to worry, or they don't, they want to make people feel safe or secure in their position, or they just don't know how to talk about it. And that ultimately will be the demise because you'll be avoiding it, and the specific things that are needed can't be addressed.
Have you heard of Y Combinator?
No.
Y Combinator, they're a startup fund, almost like a university. They're very close to like a university monetization. That's how they make money. So they'll accept startups. They'll also fund them, but all of their founders go through like rigorous courses and like actual semesters.
Yes.
Anyways, I would say they're the most experienced on what kills young companies. And Something that they always talk about, like a common word or a phrase used, is the founder distortion field. And it's like, it's
Love
kind of
that.
what you're talking about, where the founder comes in and when he's unwilling to see where his product actually currently is or the
Yes.
perception of it to his customers, it kills an organization.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when you hire your first hires, if I have a founder distortion field and I'm hiring somebody, I believe setting expectations is the most important thing. And what expectations? Well, you have to be real with where you're at right now. Like
Right on.
this is where the product is right now. Like there are no secrets.
Right on. And what the beauty of that is that you're going to get people who want to be in that challenge with you. Right? Every single founding of a company is a huge challenge. It's challenge after challenge after challenge after challenge. That's all you do is you are taking care of problems as a founder. Sorry, that's your job. That is your job, period. You are addressing problems, right? And if you want a team that is willing to jump in and address those problems with you, you have to be honest about where you're at. A lot of founders will paint a more unrealistic picture about where they are and what they're creating and all that sort of stuff to try to win people over, get them on their team. The problem is that those people aren't up for the challenge that's actually needed.
It seems like what you're alluding to is like, really, you have to take responsibility for what you're doing. How do you get founders to take responsibility for? It's easy to say like, oh man, like this person just sucked, or like, hey,
Yep.
man, everybody that I hired just sucks.
Yes.
How do you shift their mindset to be like, no, actually, you are responsible for what you're creating.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I always point out to founders is that they're the common denominator. In every challenge they're having with somebody who's on their team, guess who is the common? They are. Right? So it's good to just have a conversation, not like, oh, bad, shame, look how terrible you're doing, but it's good to just get centered on that, get grounded on that. Is like, I am the common denominator in all of the things that aren't working with the people that are on my team. That's good news. A lot of people would take that as bad news, but I actually say that's good news, because if you are creating or contributing to what's not working, you can change what's not working. But if you're just sitting back saying, oh, there's no good people out there, there's no good help, everybody just wants money and doesn't want to give or doesn't care, the problem is that takes the onus off of you and you don't get to do anything about it. It's just circumstance that surrounds you, and now that's going to ultimately be your demise.
What do you think? How do you think somebody can choose to shift their reality away from everybody sucks to, oh, this is my fault. I need to fix this.
Ownership is the only way. Like true ownership. Like, I created or contributed to this. I either tolerated it. If there's something not working, I was willing to tolerate it and not say something because I'm people pleasing, or I'm conflict avoidant or whatever. Just owning that, just saying, oh, I created this. Well, that's good news, because I can create something else. So let's get clear on what's not working. And then, much like the work you and I did, there's blind spots. Everybody has them. I have them. And the only way to see them is to have somebody who is just as committed to your vision as you are, that's willing to stand and give you the difficult feedback and say, look, man, I don't think this thing that you're doing or this thing that you believe is contributing to what you say you want. So you might want to take a look at it, and then we can explore what is possible outside of how you see it currently, like the belief you have around it.
Why do you think the default in us, it's like our default reaction is to protect ourselves and not take ownership?
Oh, it's such a good it's survival. We're built this way. for millions of years, we have been conditioned. It's like I say, it's written in our bones. It's in our DNA to survive. Human beings have two goals and two goals only naturally in the natural state. In the lizard, some people call it the lizard brain state, right? So there's two goals only. The first goal is to stay alive, no matter what. Stay alive. Second goal is to preserve energy in order to stay alive. When we are in our survival brain, those are the only two goals we can see. And so now when I'm with you, if there's a conflict or if there's something not working and I see it, I'm unwilling to engage in it because that's going to expend energy that I may need later to survive, to outrun the tiger, to survive the winter without much food, like all of that sort of stuff. It's literally written in us. It is the default. It's the baseline. So the opportunity is to interrupt that, and awareness is the first step to any kind of change, right? So as we become aware of like, oh, I'm in survival right now. I don't really want to be here. It's not working for me because look, we have the resources that we need now. Most of us. I mean, if we're talking to a very relatively wealthy demographic here, right? We're probably mostly in the United States. We're probably mostly have access to food and water and shelter and love. And so we're no longer needing those survival instincts all of the time, but we're now applying them to, oh, I have this conflict with Jared, but I don't want to engage in it because that might expend the energy that I need for later. And so I convince myself that I'm conflict averse and that I don't want to engage. And so then I just let it go.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think one thing that comes to my mind as you're describing that we create so many labels to justify we create so many labels to justify why we're not diving headfirst into our problems. Like, oh, well, I can't, how convenient. I can't do this because I'm this. So
yes,
therefore, I can't solve that problem.
And we always want to put it outside of ourselves, right? We want to give, and this is the thing is, but it sounds so cliche and maybe like overdone, but I really do tell founders, like, we're going to get your power back. And I know that sounds stupid, but I mean it. Like literally, we're going to take your power back because most likely you've given your power to circumstance.
This reminds me of, have you seen Crazy Stupid Love? Where Ryan Gosling and Steve Carell's like, we're going to discover your manhood. Any idea when that was lost? He's like, a strong case could be made for 1984.
That's what I mean. It sounds so stupid, but when you experience it, like taking that back from circumstance, saying, no, I created this. I can create something different. It's not the market. It's not this other person. It's not my CEO. It's not my whatever. It's like, no, it's you. Take that back. And now we've got a ball game. Now we can actually play in a realm that's going to create the results that you want rather than the results that you're just getting by default.
I like that. Do you think most people right now are just getting results by default? How do you know what normally triggers somebody to want to wake up and be like there's something wrong here. I'm not getting the results that I want.
Well, I think maybe I think it sounded like you were about to ask, how do you know if somebody's letting circumstance drive their results or if they're driving their results? And I think that's a pretty interesting question. So I want to answer that one first.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yep.
It's language. It's all in the language, right? So I'm trained to listen to language and where people give the power. That's all my work. So as you know, when I sit down with a founder, I listen to them for a really long time. And I'm listening to the words that they use because the words indicate where they put the power in their life. And that's going to give me a good idea of how much are they looking to circumstance to create the results and how much are they committed to just creating their results.
Give me an example, because I think what was so amazing and helpful for me is like it's hard to wake up and see where you're giving the power to your circumstances. What are some examples of language that, for example, I used, or any one of your clients, they were using at the beginning of their process?
You're right. It is difficult. In fact, sometimes it's impossible alone because the fish doesn't see the water it's swimming in. And it can't until somebody comes up and says, hey, look, see all this? This is water. This doesn't exist everywhere. There are other ideas, right? And that's what I love so much about my work is that I get to be that person that says like, look, this isn't the only way that it is. And so examples of some of that language that happens is like we've already called some of it out. Well, it's just so hard to get good help these days. Or it can look like, well, the market it doesn't allow, like we can't grow in this market.
Yeah. January and December, like they were down for SaaS companies.
Yes.
So like it's okay.
Right on. One that I hear a lot because I get to work with sales teams a lot around their mindset, how they see things. I hear it all the time. November and December are not good sales months.
Oh, I heard that all the time. They were our best sales months.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I'll listen to that and go, well, that's interesting. It's interesting that you say it's the fault, and I use that word loosely, but it's the fault of November and December and the circumstances that surround it, like the holidays and the money and blah, 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 blah. It's interesting that that's the challenge. You see that as the challenge and not how do we make November and December our best months of the year? That's a different question, or that's a different way of being. That's a different inquiry, because now it's like possibility, it's creativity. What would it take? Like if December could be.
Hold on, you just hit on something. You hit on the word possibility. I think that's a key word right there. Maybe. So, are you suggesting that when I'm in the mindset of survival, I'm immediately limiting the possibilities I have for success or for an outcome?
100%. 100%.
And that changing that mindset all of a sudden opens up possibilities that you might not even see.
Absolutely. Because when you're in survival, all you can ask yourself is, how do I survive? How do I get out of this alive? And my mentor, Dan Tacchini, always says, you're not going to get out of this alive. None of us are. So all this survival shit that you're doing, all of this protection, all of this blaming others so that you look good or feel right, all of that is preventing you from seeing the possibility that's out there for you. And once you ask yourself a different question like, I wonder how good this could get. Or I wonder what I could create here. I wonder what I'm not seeing.
So what if we had an A/B test where like the A is I have the mindset of November sucks, it's going to be down, it's all good, no worries, we're probably going to hit this number. And let's say for the B test it's a different mindset. It's I wonder how we can have the best month ever in November. What if we get the same outcomes for both of those? What would you say? Is there still something important to notice in the differences?
Sure. I mean, for me, which one do you like living in?
Probably the B.
Yeah. I want to live in possibility. I want to live in abundance. I want to live in there's something else we could do, creativity. And most founders want to live in that. That's why they're founders. They want to create something bigger than themselves, something that somebody told them was impossible.
I have a great concept right here. So I'm actually seeing this all over LinkedIn right now. So right now, the common, I guess, survival thing that you hear for e-commerce founders is meta ads. They're just not working.
Yeah.
Just not like my brand just can't advertise. And it's almost like I see some who they're basically throwing in the towel, and because that's the message is like, just doesn't work like it used to.
Yep.
then I see such a stark difference between other founders. Like there's a founder that I saw of a company called Feet. He dropped Meta ads 100% and is just like all in on experimenting with different things. It's really cool to watch his journey as he totally pivoted away from Meta ads, which is the backbone. It is literally how some e-commerce companies, that's how they made money.
Of course.
It was just finding an actual, like, they were just getting a positive ROI on, or a positive ROAS on Meta ads. So that's something that's super interesting. How would you coach a e-commerce founder who were saying, say they came to you and they're like, Chad, dude, I don't know if we're even gonna do half as well as we did in 2023. Meta ads, they don't work.
Yeah.
You're telling me to open up possibility, like they don't work.
Sure. Well, another thing that Dan Tacchini always says is a man with a vision cannot be held hostage by his circumstances. A man with a vision, or a person with a vision, will not be held hostage by their circumstances. What that means is that it doesn't matter the circumstance you're in. And if the circumstance is dictating it, well, then we got a vision problem. Literally. I don't say this stuff like nice, fluffy bullshit, like pie in the sky, feel good, manifestation, all of that sort of stuff. I say it like, literally, you don't have a vision that you believe in deep enough that drives you to find something else that works. Human beings have reinvented themselves over and over and over and over again since the beginning of our existence. And so if you say that Meta ads, them not working, is going to ruin your vision is weak. It means nothing to you. Because otherwise you'd be like these other founders, you'd be out testing everything that's possibly there. I've even watched you, Jared, over the last, 6, 7, 8 months, kill it on your LinkedIn engagement. Like, kill it. And you could have said the same sort of thing about any other circumstance, about ads or traditional sales or whatever. But I recognize that you and I had a conversation about this at lunch, but you were like, we have to figure out something else no matter what. Failure's not an option. And the vision is so great that it draws me to take action in ways that I don't even know what it's going to take from me. Like when you started your LinkedIn campaigns, did you have any idea what that was going to what that was going to take from you?
No, all I knew was, man, a lot of people are going to start seeing me now.
That's right. No matter what, right?
Yep, no matter what.
No matter what. And that's the difference, is that you started to, because no matter what drives somebody into a feedback conversation. Circumstantial conversations like Meta doesn't work, no feedback is available. You're not going to see any feedback, so you're not going to make any shifts. And yeah, you're going to die. Welcome to your future. You are going to die if Meta ads are the problem. But if you have a no matter what approach to it, and it's like, I'm going to grow this thing no matter. And dude, I have so much respect for you and your team because you're in a crowded space. You're taking on giants as competitors. And it's like, so what? We'll figure it out. Like this vision is great enough. I know that there's a place for us, and I know that there's a need for what we've created. And so no matter what, it's going to go.
Yeah, I guess I always saw a prevailing thought nowadays in SaaS businesses nowadays is, man, B2B marketing and email sequencing just don't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that like me and Logan and Thomas, they're our sales reps, we get so jazzed about. We're like, you guys really think like that's killing your business? So like, I'll give you an example. Like in 2015, 16, 17, you could enroll a bunch of contacts in a sequence, and you'd get decent reply rates and you'd get people to book demos, and it just worked. It was
Yep.
like, it's like the game was on easy mode. Buyers have gotten smart. So we're in 2023, 2024. Dude, those sequences, they don't work as well anymore. You can still get some results, but buyers have gotten smart. Google's cracking down with new AI. People, like, they just don't like reading spam. So honestly, it's something that's so funny to me is my sales reps love it when they see posts like that and they just dog on it because they're like, dude, I'm booking like 30 demos in a month because none of y'all motherfuckers are cold calling.
Yes.
Like, I'm cold calling, and guess what? Nobody else cold calls.
Yeah.
And I'm booking demos every day.
That's right.
It's so funny. Like,
yeah. And that's an example of the things that people are avoiding that they probably know would create results for them, but they're unwilling to like put in the work and put in the practice and put in the discipline. Right? It's like if what happens is meta ads just become the scapegoat for your demise. That's all. And no problem. Like, I don't got any judgment around it for these founders or for these business owners, but that's going to be your legacy. Is that ads stopped working. You didn't want to do the work. You didn't want to grind. You didn't want to test and get creative. And so you failed.
what's interesting is one of, I don't pretend to know all the answers to the meta ads crisis. I don't. But I do think one of the answers is going all in on organic content. It's like, with the rise of AI, I think so many people, consumers, they like to know who they're buying from and what the
Connect.
story is. They like to connect to the brand.
That's right.
So a lot of times, a lot of these companies that are complaining about meta ads just not working and how that's tanking the company, it's like, well, it's because maybe your business model was focused around acquiring new customers on Meta at a profitable ROAS. So it's one of the easy answers to dive into that is hard is, well, start making organic, real content. Like, do some founder-led content, explain your story. And you're going to eat shit for 6 months.
That's right.
But you'll figure something out just through organic content, filming stuff at film labs, just throwing shit at the wall. Like, you'll get a video that gets like 1 million views. You will.
Yeah.
It's possible on TikTok, and those will convert to sales. That you just got to experiment. You got to put yourself out there.
But here's the thing, Jared, is that there will come a day, probably very soon, that those things no longer work. So then what are you going to do? You're going to roll over now and say, oh, organic content on LinkedIn doesn't work. I'm just going to throw in the towel. Or are you going to say, what's next?
What's next?
What's next? And in order for you to get clear on what's next, you have to be clear on what's now. I say there is no next without now. And most people don't know where they are now. Like, honestly know where they are right now. And that's, I mean, good portion of the first 2 months of my work with any founder is getting clear of like, where are we now? The real truth about where we are, right? You had some team issues that you weren't willing to see at that point. And we had to get brutally honest with ourselves about where we actually are now in order for there to be any kind of significant next move.
And I would add to that too, your contributions to why you're at the place where you're at.
100%.
So you can stop doing those things that are contributing.
Right on. Or at least start practicing something new, right? So we're acting towards the vision in new action rather than beating yourself up or just acting in rebellion against what is.
Maybe a little bit of a side tangent. Something that's common. You and I have talked about this on the side in coaching sessions. It's a common phrase used, especially in Mormon and ex-Mormon culture, is like shame and the shame cycle. You just talked about beating yourself up. How is beating yourself up sometimes not as noble a thing as we make it?
It's so good, man. Shame is a scapegoat. Like, if I beat myself up enough, then you can't beat me up for my mistakes and my failures. So as long as I make myself feel like the shittiest person who doesn't deserve love, success, relationship, all of those things that we really want, if I do that to myself, then I can't be hurt more by you. Now, how does that apply to business is that it's just exactly what we've been talking about. If I beat myself up enough about what's not working and how I'm an imposter, I don't belong here, I don't know what I'm doing, and therefore I'm wasting all these people's time, and what if they found out about me, and all of that sort of stuff. If I do that to myself enough, then I don't have to see your feedback. Because look, I already know all this, Jared. I already know I'm shit. So I don't need to hear from you where I'm missing it. And so in that way, it becomes a tool. Now, it's not a conscious tool. It's not something we do. I don't wait, you and I don't wake up in the morning and go, well, I'm going to shame myself so that nobody else can touch me. But it's something that we learned early on. It's learned behavior early on. And we just haven't interrupted it yet. So I just always tell my clients, get over yourself. You're not as significant as you think you are.
How did you get out of your shame cycle?
I wouldn't say I'm out of it. I would say I'm practicing not going to that space. Look, man, my dad passed away in January. And we didn't have a great relationship. And I noticed where I wanted to go when he died, which was like all this shame about what I could have said, what I should have done, who I could have been for him. And those are all true, and I'm examining those so that I could create something different with my people that are still here. But I noticed myself wanting to shame myself. And that shame can become an escape or an excuse not to learn from it and then go create something different. Because that's not what I'm going to do with shame. With shame, I'm just going to sit around, get depressed, feel sorry about myself, and I won't learn or change anything. And so I continually tell myself, when I feel that shame come up, no, that's not going to serve me. I get it. It's there. It's like part of me. It's like, Carl Jung talked about befriending the dark side. Shame is that dark side of ourselves. So if we befriend the dark side, then we can actually use it. And so when I have a hold of the shame and I say, no, I'm not going to use that, I'm going to go this other direction of ownership, accountability, and something new like discipline. And that's a daily process for me.
I think a lot of the common thread between a lot of these discussions is it all comes back to giving yourself the power and not giving it away to external circumstances. And even a shame cycle is sort of like that.
That's right.
Not even sort of, it really is.
It's 100% that. And look,
you're responsible for your own concept of worthiness frankly, your actions in reference to what your view of worthiness or good is.
That's right. That's exactly right. And shame, just think about it, right? So shame is a control tactic. You look at any cult. I study cults because I'm fascinated with human behavior. I'm fascinated by what motivates people, and I'm fascinated by how people interpret the world that they're in. And most of us would watch some crazy cult documentary and we would be like, why would you ever be a part of that? And what's true about the control that cults maintain is they all use shame. They know it's their number one tool for control. Number one, there is no other tool as powerful as shame. Now, think about this. This is what's interesting to me, is that we use it on ourselves to try to control, to try to feel like we are in control. The truth is, we're not in control. We are in control of very, 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 very little. And that's what we believe and the action that we take on our beliefs. Those are the only things we're in control of.
So to close this loop a little bit, because I want to move on to something else, another part of the discussion. You keep talking about, like, it seems the common theme here is like, realize what you're doing right now that's getting you these results you probably don't like.
Yes.
And then change so you can get a new result, a new life, a new outcome. What is the best motivator to make that shift?
So to not go too deep into this, I actually don't think we change. I always tell my clients that is like, I've got good news and bad news for you. Good news is we're going to create new results. Bad news is you're not going to change. So just get with that. Meaning these things are here to stay. Like the thoughts that keep you down, the thoughts that keep you from creating results, they're not going anywhere. The difference is that I'm going to show you how you don't have to believe those thoughts. Because those thoughts are not yours. Those thoughts are ancient. They've been here for millions of years. You're not the first one who's felt like a failure. You're not the first one who's convinced yourself you're an imposter. You're not the first one who has used shame to motivate you or keep you imprisoned. That is an old story that you inherited. And if you believe it, then you act it out again. If you choose not to believe it, then new things are possible. You become less significant in your own eyes, and now you can be for something more significant, like building a badass business that employs incredible people who are committed to it, and you get to instill in them this mentality of ownership for their own life. I mean, the impact that you can have when you're less significant and you're not believing your own bullshit, man, that's it. That's the whole thing.
I love it. Okay, to pivot the conversation to something different, I want to dive in pretty as deep as we can here in the next 15 minutes or so. I want to actually get some good takeaways, or I guess like some bullet points.
Yeah, we've been very philosophical.
Yeah, of how something that's probably common with anybody who would ever listen to this, or you have to be able to have difficult conversations with a founder or a co-founder or an employee or an executive team, just a coworker. I think every single person has things that they want to say to a coworker or an employee that they're not saying, or it's so sugar coated. And it's like a compliment sandwich. It's just a bunch of bullshit. What's your advice, or give us a couple bullet points on how somebody can practice like real-time feedback. Like, oh, this thing comes up and oh, that bugs me. Like, I don't think she should be doing that.
Yes.
Or
yes.
That just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah.
Like how can you practice real-time feedback with your team?
That's great. So you use the term real-time feedback. That means that we're giving the feedback as soon as we see the breakdown. I would invite people to believe that or see that in their businesses, the sooner they address a breakdown, the less disruptive it is. But what happens is when we see little things that aren't right, we convince ourselves that, well, they're just little. I can overlook them. I don't need to address them now. Time will take care of it, all of that sort of stuff. And I would say, no, that's actually what's producing your bigger breakdowns that you're spending all of your time working on, right? Most founders, the biggest complaint I hear from founders is that they don't have enough time and they're always putting out fires. And I tell them it's because you are unwilling to give real-time feedback, period. If you were addressing these things when it was just this little teeny tiny, like we have the shit hors d'oeuvre principle, right? These things, these breakdowns, they show up as little tiny shit hors d'oeuvres, and it is shit, so you don't want to eat it. And it looks uncomfortable to address, but you're like, it's not that big of a deal, blah blah, and you push it away. Well, pretty
I'll talk about it later if he or she does it again.
That's right. And then pretty soon it comes back as a shit sandwich. It's a little bit bigger, it's a little bit deeper, it's a little bit more personal. It's now affecting something in the business, and you're like, I don't have the time right now for this. You push that away. Then it comes back as a shit 3-course meal. Pretty soon, you've got a shit buffet, and you can't ignore it at this point because this means total breakdown if this is ignored. And now it's a really big deal.
It normally ends in probably like a termination or an explosive conversation or...
That's exactly right. Yes. Total disruption to the system, to the team, to the product, all of that sort of stuff. So the invitation is like, when you feel it, when you see it, and this is what most founders are so good at this, seeing what's not right early on, but the breakdown happens that they don't say anything.
Yeah.
Right? And so...
but not just founders. Like,
of course.
Also just, employees, coworkers, in relationships.
Well, those who are committed.
Everything.
Right? Those who are committed to the vision will see it earlier. Because they're clear on where we're going and they're clear on this isn't going to get us there if we keep it going this way. Right? So you asked, how do we have these conversations? Well, first, be honest about your experience. So the best thing you could do is, if this feels like a hard conversation for you, if it feels like a scary conversation for you, tell the person, this feels like a scary conversation to have with you. I don't know how to do it right.
Just be honest.
Yeah. But I want to be honest with you because I care about you and I care about what we're up to. Will you hang with me in this conversation? I'm sure I'm going to make mistakes. I'm sure I'm going to say things maybe that I didn't mean, but will you stick with me long enough to where we can get a clear understanding on it? That's the first step. Just be honest. We want to look good. We want to feel good. We want to be right, or we want to be in control. And all of those things are working against us in this situation, because when those are our goal, we want to go in there looking like we know what we're up to and we're going to say everything right and we're the right ones and we have all the information and blah, 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 blah.
Or you just want to be liked. So
That's right.
Just sugarcoating everything.
That's right. That's exactly right. And your role as a founder is not to be liked. I'm sorry. It's not. And if that is your goal, you're destined for some heartache, for sure. So be honest about this. Be honest about your experience in the situation, where you're coming from, and most decent people, that's going to be such a trust builder with, right? Like, Jared, if I come to you and I'm like, man, I don't know how to talk to you about this because I want to be liked by you and I care so much about you and what you think of me, but we really got to address this thing. Will you hang in with me? Because I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to blunder, all that stuff. Are you willing to hang in that conversation with me? Trust goes through the roof. They're like, oh yeah, this person's being real with me. They don't know what they're doing. I could help in this.
Or at least it feels like they're in it. I've experienced so much on that side, like just the people pleasing, like ignoring the shit hors d'oeuvres, and then eating the shit buffet.
Yes,
I think we've all done that. It was interesting though. Recently, I had an experience with one of my team members, one of our SDRs. His name was Logan. So Logan is transitioning to closing, and I remember very distinctly. There's one day, because he crushed at booking demos, and I could just sense apprehension the week that he was supposed to be focusing a little bit more on closing. And I remember that I remember so specifically, like, there's how you say it, the shit hors d'oeuvre.
Yep.
We were just sitting in a conference room, and I could just tell he was uneasy and he was not wanting to say something like that. Like that was the shit hors d'oeuvre right there.
Yes.
And I remember I just chose to call it. I was like, dude, what's going on, man? You feel really uneasy right now. Really, like, is there something going on? Let's chat through this. And after like a 30, 45-minute chat, he was very, very nervous about closing, and he was taking on too much responsibility over Luminous failing or it succeeding. And yeah, that was a really cool example right there of where I was able to have that conversation right there. And yeah, well, I honestly feel so much closer to my teammates after those types of conversations.
Of course.
And I just love when he or somebody else is willing to talk about those intimate things, because it just shows that they're in it. Like they do care. And I don't know, I would much rather have it that way, the shit hors d'oeuvre, the uncomfortable. Like, it's uncomfortable calling something out.
It is.
But I prefer that to not addressing something for 3 months, him not saying anything, and then we blow up at each other.
That's right.
Well, what the fuck? You were supposed to be closing. He's like, well, you didn't fucking train me.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that. That's what it looks like. I think.
1,000. Well, I'm working with a client right now that we're deep into their team. This is an incredible team, rad company, and they have had an executive in a position who hasn't been cutting it, and they haven't been letting him know. They haven't been when it showed up as a shit hors d'oeuvre, they talked themselves out of giving the feedback at that moment. Now we're 4 months later, and they don't see a path forward with him. And they missed the opportunity for a performance plan. They missed the opportunity because they were unwilling to have those conversations when they saw them. So now it's going to be complete disruption to his department. And, anything beyond a termination at this point would be inauthentic for them.
Talk about it. So an A/B test right there. I think this is such a good example. Not eating the shit hors d'oeuvres, not addressing that challenged executive and their perspective of him. You could have done something like this. An early conversation like that, minimal disruption. But now, 4 months later, it's like, oh, this is disrupting the business for the unforeseeable future.
Yes. And I'm not saying if they would have said it earlier and got him on a performance plan and, all that. I'm not saying he would have worked out. I'm just saying he would have given him the dignity of an opportunity to see what's not working and change it and become committed to what the business or what the company and the team is all about. You would have given him that opportunity, and he deserves that opportunity. People on your team deserve the dignity of the feedback that you have for them. If you're holding the feedback back, you think so little of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you're not telling them how it is and what you see in a kind way, in a way that you're connected to them and you're for them, but if you don't do that, you think so little of them. And then I ask the question, why are you hiring people you think so little of? Well, you must think little of yourself or your vision or your company. I'm not trying to be a dick here. I'm just saying this is like the truth. If not many people are willing to break down what you're up to in this way to show you like, hey, you're in control here. You have the power. And if you follow these trails, it shows how little you believe in what you're up to.
Yep. Well, I think we're actually right at time. But Chad, thank you so much for the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
That was awesome, man. Appreciate our friendship. Everybody needs a friend like Chad who will give you that real-time feedback. So I recommend it. Chad, where can everybody find you?
LinkedIn is a great place to find me. I'm hanging out on there, hanging out on Instagram. I also have a podcast called Founders League that you've been on.
Mm-hmm.
That's mainly on YouTube, and then on all of the podcast platforms as well.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'll link those in the description of this podcast episode, but thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This is fun. I love talking with you.
Okay. Peace.